Starting January 1st, 2018, farmers and ranchers in California will only be able to administer medically important antibiotics with the approval of a veterinarian. The state has enacted a law barring routine antibiotic use, including for the purposes of growth promotion. Several fast food companies have said they'll transition to meat-raised antibiotic-free, with Subway joining the list this week. That chain says by the end of 2016, it'll only serve meat from chickens that have never received antibiotics. Their move in pork and beef will take until 2025. On Thursday, we talked with Oklahoma State's Jayson Lusk to learn how consumers perceive the use of antibiotics on the farm, but we started by asking about the background of this topic.
It's actually been an issue that's been debated for probably more than a decade at this point. The European Union over 10 years ago banned the subtherapeutic use of antibiotics. And so, this has boiled over in debates in the United States, and it's been a big discussion point for a long time. About a year ago, the FDA came out with some new guidelines. They're voluntary guidelines. They made some changes in terms of removing certain classes of what they called medically important antibiotics for use for growth promotion reasons. And those rules and the implications of those rules are just now coming out, and we're starting to understand what impacts they'll have. And then yes, California just recently came out with its own new set of rules, which are sort of a step beyond the FDA's rules in terms of outlawing the use of medically important antibiotics, even for the prevention of disease.
Is there evidence to suggest that there is a problem, that a problem exists?
So, this is a debatable topic. I think there is the concern here really is not a food safety concern. There are withdrawal times, and especially in products like milk. If milk is tested to have an antibiotic residue, it's immediately thrown out. And so, in terms of a food safety risk, that's not the problem at all. The concern here really is about the development of antibiotic resistance. And it's a little unclear what the impacts are here. There is some evidence to suggest that the use of some antibiotics in animals could have impacts in terms of humans developing resistance. But the debate is how big is the problem? And I think at least the evidence that I've seen suggests that it's a relatively small problem relative to the overuse of antibiotics in humans. But it is a problem nonetheless, and so I think at least some people view this as a step towards fighting what could be a larger problem in humans later.
What is the consumer perception about this?
So we've done research on this topic. By and large, people don't know much about animal production. So if you tell them antibiotics are regularly fed to animals, most consumers don't like it. And they seem to express some willingness to pay to avoid the subtherapeutic use of antibiotics in livestock products. That being said, when we ask on surveys, for example, do you think farmers ought to be able to use antibiotics for disease prevention or to treat sick animals, then most consumers are okay with that. They say that's okay. What they really seem to not like is this regular subtherapeutic feeding.
We've seen that Subway and a number of other restaurants, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Panera, said that they're going to phase out their use of antibiotics or meats that were used with antibiotics. Is this where the momentum is going now?
It certainly seems to be the case. Actually, even within, say, the poultry industry, there's been some industry organizations that have also pledged to move away from antibiotic use. And so it does seem to be moving in that direction. And part of it is a response to consumer concerns and trying to get out ahead of some of those consumer concerns. And it's mixed in with a whole bunch of issues and sort of quote-unquote clean food movement, if you will. But I think this is one where probably there is some science to support the concerns about antibiotic resistance. And so I think these companies see this as a step to look responsible in the eyes of the consumer.
Do you think we continue to see this a state-by-state issue?
Well, the new FDA rules at least have been implemented nationwide, and so there is now some federal regulations on the books that will require, for example, veterinarians or a veterinary relationship to use these antibiotics. And so there are slightly stricter rules now at a federal level. Whether other states will proceed as California does is a little hard to know. California is a big state, but in terms of a lot of livestock production, it's probably not a big impact in the sense that they have some feedlots, but not a lot. They're a pretty small state in terms of pork production. And so the impacts on the overall meat supply are relatively minor, and so it's much harder to see an issue like that coming around in states that have large concentrations of animal feeding operations.
We've seen consumer concerns and even ballot initiatives on GMOs, antibiotics, crates and cages. Is there anything that makes this say that it affects production now or it could impact future production?
I think so. In fact, we just are completing some research looking at a ballot initiative that was in California back in 2008 that banned the use of so-called battery cages in egg production. And these laws just went into effect on January 1. And when we look at the change in prices, in egg prices in California compared to prices in the rest of the country, it looks like it's had, increased prices by about 20 to 30% in California. So it certainly has an impact on prices. The impacts on the production side are a little less clear and will probably depend on which commodity we're talking about. Producers there are getting higher prices, but they may not be selling quite as much. So the actual impact on their bottom line is a bit ambiguous at this point.
On the Market Journal website, we'll link to more resources on antibiotic use, including California's new initiative.